Korea, saying it ushered in a turnaround for a positive new phase of bilateral relations. He called on China and Canada to advance the building of a new strategic partnership with a sense of responsibility toward history, their peoples and the world, and to place bilateral relations onto a path of healthy, stable and sustainable development to better benefit both sides.
Good morning.
Chinese President Xi noted that the sound and steady development of China-Canada relations serves the common interests of both nations. It also contributes to global peace and prosperity. Xi called on the two sides to advance the building of a new China-Canada strategic partnership and deliver greater benefits to the peoples of both countries. Xi put forward 4 proposals on how the two sides could be partners and advance China-Canada relations. First, he said the two countries should respect each other. Xi noted that over the 55 years since the establishment of diplomatic ties, bilateral relations have experienced twists and turns, accumulating valuable experience and practical insights. Despite their differences, Xi said the two sides must respect each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity, as well as the political systems and their respective development path. Secondly, he said the two countries should aim for common development. Mutual benefits and win-win cooperation lie at the core of bilateral economic and trade relations, with both sides gaining substantial benefits from collaboration. China's high-quality development and high-level opening up will continue to create new opportunities and expand the space for bilateral cooperation. He also said the two parties should step up cooperative efforts, streamline negative lists, and further strengthen the bonds of their shared interests through deeper cooperation. Third, he said, the two nations should build mutual trust. She noted that people-to-people exchange serves as the most fundamental interconnection between countries. He called on both sides to encourage cooperation in education, culture, tourism, sports, and local government sectors, facilitate personnel mobility, and foster strong public support for bilateral relations. Lastly, President Xi said the two sides should collaborate with each other. She noted that a divided world cannot address the common challenges facing humanity. He said that the path forward lies in true multilateralism and the building of a community with a shared future for humanity. She pledged that China stands ready to strengthen coordination with Canada under international frameworks such as UN, G20 and APEC to address global challenges together. Prime Minister Carney said that Canada and China share a long history of friendly exchanges with highly complementary economies, extensive common interests, and abundant cooperation opportunities. He noted that Canada is committed to working with China to build a robust, sustainable, and new type of strategic partnership that will bring greater well-being to both peoples. Carney reaffirmed Canada's adherence to One China policy and its dedication to working with China on the basis of mutual respect and collaboration. He called on the two sides to expand and deepen cooperation in trade, energy, agriculture, finance, education, and climate change. He said that multilateralism constitutes the cornerstone of global security and stability, and the global governance initiative proposed by President Xi carries significant importance. Following the meeting, the two sides released a joint statement.
Well, the Chinese president has also received the credentials of 18 new ambassadors to China at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. President Xi welcomed the ambassadors to travel widely in China to gain a thorough understanding of the nation and deepen ties. He said China is forging ahead on a new journey of modernization after completing the 14th five-year plan. As China charts its development in the 15th five-year plan, the nation will continue to open up wider to the world and contribute to shared growth and common progress. President Xi also says the only choice for the world amid turbulence and change is solidarity and cooperation. She said China will continue joining hands with other countries to build a community with a shared future for humanity. The former president of the Republic of Korea, Yoon Suk-yeol, has been found guilty in the first of several trials linked to his failed martial law attempt in 2024. Yoon has been sentenced to 5 years in prison. Our reporter Shane Ham has more from Seoul.
The court here handing down a sentence of 5 years against the former Republic of Korea President Yoon Suk-yeol here. The prosecutors had initially requested a 10-year sentence. Now, this specific trial, which began back in August, it took nearly 5 minutes to go through the evidence. The main charge here was obstruction of justice and investigation, specifically with the special prosecution team that was trying to initiate an arrest warrant against the former President Yoon back in January of last year after he had been impeached. If you remember, the former president had barricaded himself inside the official residence. But what the court here decided was that in fact it violated the investigation's attempt into serving that arrest warrant. Also, as far as charges against violating the rights of other cabinet members, which he also faced during these trials, the court found that the cabinet members that were not present at that meeting when this martial law decree was being devised based on law, that violated the rights of those cabinet members. So other minor charges that he was facing against, the court had decided that he's not guilty on those charges. But again, a final verdict sentencing of 5 years being handed down to the former ROK president here. President Yoon has during the entire trial has remained that he is innocent. This martial law decree was under the boundary of the presidential's orders, but based on what the court found is that his abuse of power did cross a line, and it did lead, of course, to the former president being arrested, the first sitting one, in fact, here in South Korea. But again, prosecutors had sought 10 years, but this trial, which began in August, is not the end of his legal proceedings. The so-called big one, the insurrection mastermind trial, is set to begin, or the verdict of that is expected to come the middle of next month.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has discussed the situation in Iran in separate calls on Friday with Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying that Moscow was willing to mediate in the region. Putin's spokesperson told reporters the Russian leader will continue efforts to de-escalate the situation. U.S. Ambassador to the UN Mike Waltz told the Security Council on Thursday that all options remain on the table. And Iran's Deputy UN Ambassador Gholam Hossein Darzi told the Council that Iran does not seek escalation, but warned that any act of aggression would be met with a decisive response. Iranian authorities say thousands of people have been arrested in connection with the recent unrest there. Senior clerics and officials are calling for firm judicial action, while also urging the government to address economic concerns. Officials say calm is returning to many cities, even as tensions remain high amid uncertainty over a possible U.S. attack. Our correspondent Seper Saremi reports from Tehran.
It's Friday, January 16th. I've come to one of the biggest shopping centers in Tehran. Normalcy seems to be returning to life here in Iran. The streets are calm, and from a security perspective, everything is okay. But I believe this normalcy is just on the surface. We've been shut off from the international world for more than a week now. And international calls became possible just a few days ago. And texting messages is so restricted. Many economic experts that I talked to here in Iran believe that this internet shut-off will have a very huge, big impact on Iran's already fragile economy. I also talked to one of the shoppers here to hear his opinion.
Iran's economy has become much worse. Everything is very expensive. I own a supermarket myself. Egg prices are now almost 5 times higher, and cooking oil is nearly 4 times more expensive. Everything has become costly, and people are under a lot of pressure.
The demonstrations have ended. The city is safe. But the real problem, the cause of all these demonstrations and protests, is still here and can be felt by everyone. CGTN, Tehran.
To your African news now, at least 7 people were killed in overnight violence in central Uganda following national elections on Thursday, that is, according to local police. Meanwhile, the Electoral Commission's preliminary results show that President Yoweri Museveni has taken an early lead of 76% based on results from over half of the polling stations. His main challenger, Bobi Wine, has nearly 20% of the votes counted. Election officials said final results will be announced in the next few days. As domestic and international observers closely monitor the elections, there was heavy security deployment all over the country. The voting was marred by delays due to technical problems that left many voters stranded at polling stations. As the day progressed, long queues were seen across the country. Apart from Museveni, who has been in power for nearly 4 decades, 7 other presidential candidates were also on the ballot.
This is the candidate's performance as of this hour. Kyagulanyi Ssentamu Robert, 1,414,619, constituting 20.71% of the total votes cast. The total number of polling stations where the Ugandans went to cast their votes yesterday are 50,739. The total number of polling stations whose results we have received so far here at the National Tally Center are 30,138, constituting 59.4% of the total number of polling stations.
Now, the ongoing U.S. immigration crackdown continues to generate debate, with legal experts questioning the use of so-called third country deportations. The Trump administration has sent nationals from other countries to some African countries, including Ghana, South Sudan and Eswatini. But as the focus remains on the numbers, affected families are telling a much more personal story. CGTN's David Mbithi reports.
It was last November when this footage of a visibly distressed Rabiatu Kuyate went viral. The 58-year-old is seen fighting Ghanaian immigration officers who were forcing her to board a van to start her journey back to her native country of Sierra Leone. She had fled the country nearly 30 years ago and had not visited since. Her son, Mohammed Al-Ghali, who was raised in the U.S. state of Maryland, says he was stunned by the footage.
I had so many negative emotions go through my mind because I hadn't seen my mom at all since July. The next time I had seen her, she was getting dragged, from the hotel through the streets in Ghana. That was the next time I had seen my mom.
Just a week earlier, Kuyate was among more than 30 third country nationals deported by the U.S. to Ghana. In the months prior, she had fought hard to avoid being deported to her home country, where she says she had been raped during the Civil War and where she feared being tortured because of her father's ties to the political opposition. A U.S. immigration judge even granted her protection from being sent back. But U.S. Immigration and Custom Enforcement bypassed the order by deporting her to Ghana instead.
In America, when they were bringing me, they said I'm coming to Ghana. Ghana is supposed to be my safe haven. I cannot go to Freetown because of political reasons.
The incident put Ghana in the middle of a heated debate over Trump's use of third country removals to hasten the departure of unauthorized immigrants who cannot easily be sent to their home countries. Legal representatives of the deportees said Ghana's repatriations appeared systematic and that none of their clients had opportunities to raise legal objections before the flights.
Contrary to what the administration is saying about the nature of these third country deportations, the U.S. is deporting some of the most vulnerable refugees that are in this country to places where they don't have protection, where they will thereafter be sent on to places where they will face persecution and torture, as determined by a U.S. immigration judge, more likely than not.
In a statement, a U.S. Department of Homeland Security spokesperson claimed all those sent to Ghana were what she described as illegal aliens who received due process and had final removal orders. But she did not address questions about the subsequent repatriations, noting that it was now beyond the US's domain. Meanwhile, Ghana's Foreign Ministry, Interior Ministry and Immigration Service have not responded to questions about the handling of US deportees. David Mbili, CGTN.
Let's turn to South Africa, where flooding triggered by overnight rains in the northeast have claimed at least 19 lives. Authorities in South Africa say they have since recovered 2 more bodies from Limpopo following the widespread flooding. The deaths occurred in a village in Limpopo province near Kruger National Park and neighboring Mpumalanga. Nearly 200 people have been rescued there. President Cyril Ramaphosa visited Limpopo on Thursday to assess the extent of the damage and the response of government. Images released by the National Defense Force showed a military helicopter airlifting stranded residents from trees. In neighboring Mpumalanga province, rescuers recovered the body of a woman who drowned while trying to cross a river. The South African Weather Service issued the maximum warning for more rain in parts of the country, while neighboring Mozambique is also on alert after flooding inundated roads and homes. Well, the rains have also led to the closure of parts of South Africa's iconic Kruger National Park. Authorities say they have closed some of the reserve and evacuated tourists in lodges situated in vulnerable areas. Limpopo and Mpumalanga have been the most affected provinces. CGTN's Wanja Mungai with more.
Kruger National Park, South Africa's largest and most famous reserve, is surrounded by 6 rivers. 3 weeks of intense rainfall in the country have seen them bursting their banks. Authorities say the closure is a precautionary measure until conditions improve, adding that the decision to temporarily close areas like the Palabora Gate in the north was necessary.
We close it for 24 hours and monitor what is happening in that particular site. The Letaba River has lost its wall. The Oliphant is becoming full. That's why we closed those parts of the park.
The South African Water Service has warned of increased flooding in parts of the northern region, with 100 to 200 millimeters of rainfall expected over the next 2 days. The situation has left authorities concerned over some facilities within the reserve which have been destroyed.
Some of the roads infrastructure has been affected, they've been washed away, and we've lost about 2 bridges. And some of the bridges are covered in the water, as you see behind us here. That this is the road that leads you to the north of the park. What is interesting about the animals is they're quite adaptive to this particular environment. So intuition works with animals. They often move to higher ground. So we're not really worried about the animals. However, as the water is moving so fast, some of the animals will move with the water, particularly crocodiles. So we are saying to people that are living in areas that are adjacent to the park, they must be careful.
Park staff and tourists lodging in areas where campsites have been flooded have been evacuated. Meanwhile, in the higher part of the park, where there is no threat of major flooding, tourists continue to indulge in the wild.
This is why we come to the bush, and we can't help for nature. It's God's way of putting water back into the earth again, and hopefully a bit more animals that's on the breeding and everything. So we're enjoying it.
According to scientists, these floods are among the natural disasters brought about by climate change. On Thursday, the South African Weather Service issued a red level 10 warning for disruptive rainfall for parts of Limpopo and Mpumalanga. Wanja Mungai, CGTN.
You're watching Africa Live on CGTN. Here's what's coming up on the program. We take you to the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, where one health facility is standing out as a beacon of hope. Welcome back. Now, with the ongoing conflict in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, One health facility stands out as a beacon of hope. Facilities in other towns have either been destroyed or looted. The Beni General Referral Hospital, managed by the International Committee of the Red Cross and Red Crescent, continues to treat both victims of war and general patients who keep coming in large numbers. CGTN's Enoch with more details.
The Beni General Hospital in North Kivu province serves as a frontline health facility. The hospital receives and treats patients from across the country, including civilians and wounded fighters. Mumbere Yusuf and Maombi Justin are examples.
I was wounded in the leg. There was no medical care. There were only nurses from small health centers. It wasn't proper care, but since I arrived here, I thank God because I find that the care here is good. I've been here for 2 months now, and I can see that I'm making good progress.
I was in Masisi territory. The M23 rebels shot me. My family took me to hospital in Pinga, but they weren't able to treat me there. So I was transferred to Beni. Now, there's been a change. When I arrived, I couldn't sit like this. But today, I can start to move.
The ICRC initially set up the hospital in 2019 as a stabilization center. However, the intensity of the fighting has led to an influx of patients.
Given the situation we are currently experiencing in Eastern DRC, we are treating between 80 and 90 patients every day. Beni seems to be calmer and has the resources. There are medical facilities elsewhere, of course, but they don't have enough resources. That's why they have to seek help from partners who do have sufficient resources.
Despite numerous attempts at peace deals between the army and the M23 rebel group, none have taken hold.
With war, there are consequences. First of all, there are many casualties, many wounded who are already filling up the hospitals in North Kivu, particularly here in our town of Beni. Unfortunately, most armed groups do not respect international humanitarian law. Often, when there is a ceasefire, you'll see on the ground, as we do, that there are always violations.
According to a joint report by the Congolese government and international organizations, more than 7,000 wounded have been recorded in hospitals in North Kivu and South Kivu provinces. Enoch, CGTN.
Now, companies are jostling over the DRC's critical minerals as villages like Lukutwe in the southern province of Katanga seek to protect their land. There is growing fear mining and exploration expeditions will encroach on protected areas and nature reserves. Katanga produces a host of minerals, but none more in demand than the silver-tinged cobalt, essential for electric batteries and defense technology. Here is more on that report from Beryl Oro.
70 kilometers from the mining capital Lubumbashi, Lukutwe community leaders have established a forest concession to legalize customary land titles after watching mining firms displace other villages a decade ago in mineral-rich DRC.
We have one area for protection, another for conservation, and other areas for development. The development area is where villagers can farm and carry out small activities that require cutting trees. The conservation area is meant to preserve the forest, and no farming activities are allowed there.
The Lukutwe Community Forest Reserve obtained official land titles to help avoid unauthorized exploitation, as huge metal reserves draw more investors. But community leaders fear displacement from traditional lands despite the community's protected status.
We face many threats to our forests. Recently, a powerful individual came and said he had already bought our concession. We asked how that was possible when we are the ones who hold the documents. We did not know who he was, but he arrived with machinery and wanted to start work. He was trying to take our land.
In Katanga, there are 20 reserves covering 60,000 acres. 12 more are in the process of approval. The DRC's south is covered in what is known as Miombo forests, the largest dry tropical forest ecosystem in the world. But as in other parts of Africa, forests are shrinking due to agriculture, deforestation and mining.
We must protect our forests because if all the trees are cut down, the land will become a desert. Rain will become scarce, agriculture will be difficult, and we risk dying of hunger. We now know how to protect our forests and grow mushrooms because we have been trained, but there are no longer enough mushrooms in the field.
From 2001 to 2024, the Lualaba and Haut-Katanga provinces lost 1.38 million hectares of tree cover, much of it along the copper-cobalt belt, according to the Global Forest Watch.
There was a time when we harvested large quantities of good quality tomatoes. But during the dry season, mining operators wash their minerals and release the water into the Luafi River along with acids, and sometimes the fish die. When this happens, our farmland is also damaged. Today it is impossible to grow tomatoes because the harvest is rotten and full of insects.
For these communities, the difficult application of laws, decrees and orders is an obstacle. Politics also plays a role, with poor communities lacking clout. And a road built across the Katanga local forest concession to reach a mining site is a reminder that one day a mining company may try to come for their land. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, is currently visiting Sudan to assess conditions on the ground in the nearly 3-year conflict there. The UN Human Rights Office says attacks on civilians, mass displacement, hunger and the collapse of essential services have severely undermined basic rights across Sudan. CGTN's Joy Kiruki Juma with the details.
UN Human Rights Chief Turk began his visit to Sudan on Wednesday, even as fighting between the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces continues across multiple regions. He held talks with authorities in Port Sudan and met with civil society groups, humanitarian agencies and the UN country team working to protect civilians and document abuses. On Friday, he traveled to Dongola, the capital of northern state, a key refuge for people displaced by fighting in Darfur and Kordofan regions.
What they are telling me is about the horrible plight that many people, many survivors of this horrific war are going through every day.
Humanitarian partners told the High Commissioner that families have been displaced multiple times, while support for survivors of sexual violence and people with disabilities remains severely limited. Despite these challenges, Turk said local organizations are attempting to find solutions, even as resources remain stretched.
There needs to be an all-out effort, both within Sudan and by the international community, to help them to facilitate their work so that they can provide the much-needed humanitarian assistance that is required under the circumstances.
Turk is expected to visit internally displaced communities at the Al-Afad gathering site before returning to Port Sudan on Sunday. He will conclude his mission with press briefings in Port Sudan and Nairobi, where he is expected to renew calls for greater protection of civilians and increased international support for humanitarian efforts in Sudan. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
We go to Nigeria now, where an age-old tradition still thrives and has evolved from being a mere tradition to a money-making venture. Jaggery production has existed for over 200 years and remains a revered practice among northerners in the West African nation. CGTN's Wanja Mungai tells us more.
Al-Kasim Zamba takes pride in his craft as a master jaggery producer. When the sugarcane harvest season comes around, his humble mini factory bursts with energy and activity as he turns raw sugarcane into sweet golden jaggery. For him, it's beyond a business. It's heritage.
We inherited this craft making jaggery from our ancestors, and we continued in their footsteps. It is a craft of more than 200 years since our forefathers started practicing it. In the past, horses did the hard work of mashing out the juice, but we are happy that we have easier machines to use.
The simple tools of the trade are efficient enough to keep the art and the business going.
This jaggery is processed from sugarcane that we planted and left to ripen. And after the rainy season, we set up our machines, cut the sugarcane stalks. We run the stalks through the machine to separate the juice from the pulp. Then we take the juice for boiling.
The boiling process is important to evaporate excess moisture and to skim impurities to achieve a perfect concentrated syrup. A process that can go on for hours before it is taken off the fire to cool.
When it has cooled down, we remove the jaggery from the mold and arrange it in boxes. Each carton contains 100 pieces.
The traditional jaggery production represents a local sustainable alternative that has quietly endured, providing livelihoods in rural communities while meeting demand for natural sweeteners in West African markets.
I used to drink my tea with jaggery, that is mazar kwaila in Hausa, instead of using sugar because it's cheaper and healthier.
Zambia's thriving production contrasts with Nigeria's sugar import of 1.5 million metric tons annually that costs the country millions of dollars. His jaggery has now become a sweet export to neighboring countries, including Ghana, Chad, and Cameroon. Wanjamungai, CGTN.
Now, an exhibition tracing the 14-year journey of the great Chinese philosopher Confucius as he sought to spread words of wisdom across the states of ancient China is now on display at the Henan Museum in central China. The team of curators selected artifacts that vividly trace his footsteps. Let's take a look.
The exhibition, The Journey of Practicing the Way, Confucius Traveling Among the States, is now on display at the Henan Museum, featuring precious cultural relics from 28 museums across China, with around 197 considered extremely valuable. One of them is a bronze axe head inscribed with 9 Chinese characters, including the character Zhou, a name of a fief in East China's Shandong province. It is also adorned with a Chinese dragon head motif.
The Zhou character in the location Zhouyi is likely the same as the one mentioned in the inscription, so we selected this artifact to reflect Confucius' birthplace. This bronze axe head serves as a crucial artifact referring to Confucius' birthplace.
Another major artifact is a duo, a kind of clapper bell used in ancient China for issuing proclamations during times of war. Beyond serving as a musical instrument, it is also a symbol of the political and moral education functions in ancient society.
The term "heaven will instruct the master like a wooden clapper bell" was a high honor, reflecting how people at the time viewed Confucius' role in promoting education and persuading ancient rulers to implement benevolent governance during his travels across the states.
The exhibition, which will run until March, will also feature a series of lectures and educational programs for teenagers. These initiatives aim to deepen the public's understanding of Confucius' enduring influence on Chinese culture and philosophy through first-hand encounters with artifacts and expert commentary. Yang Ran, CGTN.
Right, Uche's back, so it's time for all the latest in business. Here are your headlines.
Thank you, Mahi. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Gold output in Mali, one of Africa's largest producers, drops by 23%. And Nigeria's finance minister projects a 4.6% growth in 2026 as reforms yield positive results.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Well, Well, let's start off in Mali. The country saw its industrial gold output falling 22.9% in 2025. It was hurt by the lengthy suspension of Barrick Mining's operations, of course, due to a dispute over tougher mining rules. Now, this is all according to provisional figures from the West African nation's Mines Ministry. Mali, which is one of Africa's largest gold producers, has been pushing reforms intended to capture more value from the sector, as enshrined in a mining code introduced in 2023. Now, back in December, the government said an audit led to the recovery of $1.2 billion in arrears from mining companies. But the tougher rules sparked a 2-year standoff with Barrick, and that led the Canadian miners' massive Lolo Gonkoto complex being put under provisional administration. The government did reach a deal with the miner late last year. Well, heading to Ghana now, the country is preparing sweeping reforms to its mining sector. It is targeting long-standing investment agreements and also proposing higher royalties as global gold prices rise. Now, authorities there say the changes are meant to ensure the country captures more value from its mineral resources while also still remaining attractive to investors. Take a look.
Mining has long been central to Ghana's economy, helping the country become Africa's top gold producer. Now the government is moving to overhaul how the sector is regulated as bullion prices surge globally. At the Ghana Minerals Commission in the capital of Accra, officials say long-standing policies have gone too long without review.
Every 5 years, the policy would have to be reviewed. What we have since 2014, this has not been done, and we had to do something to bridge this gap. So that is the basis for the new reforms on the policy.
Ghana's agreements typically lock in royalty and tax terms for between 5 and 15 years. This is in exchange for investments of up to $500 million to build or expand mines. But authorities say some companies fail to meet their obligations.
Some of these companies had stability agreement. Common district assembly levy, they refused to pay. And there were things that, some people, when the market is good, you should have done for the people, they didn't. So, we feel it's been abused, and we don't want to continue in that direction.
Under the proposed reforms, mining royalties would rise from the current 3 to 5% range to between 9 and 12% depending on gold prices.
There is still some discussion, and we are not doing it in isolation because they are our partners. We've lived with some of these companies over 30 years, and we think we can find a way out to ensure that we have the investor confidence, and as a nation, we are getting our fair share of our mineral resource.
The regulator says development agreements would be scrapped entirely. It adds that the move reflects Ghana's growing experience in managing its mining sector.
I don't think at this stage in our life as a country we will have to give them, because it's been over-exploited. It's been abused by some of these international companies, because I've seen companies that have development agreement that refuse to develop the mine, and instead we're using the revenue from the country to buy mines elsewhere.
The proposed law, expected to be presented to Parliament by March, would also tighten local content rules aimed at supporting indigenous businesses.
Mining is about numbers. Once you put them together and you can make profit, it doesn't matter what people are doing. They know, it's their job to fight it.
As African governments seek a bigger share of revenues, Ghana says the challenge will be balancing investor confidence with the need to maximize returns from its mineral wealth. Yoon Suk-yeol, CGTN.
Well, let's shift our focus to Nigeria now. The country has entered a phase of economic consolidation after 2 years of reforms that helped steady inflation, also stabilize the currency and lift investor confidence. Now, speaking at the launch of a New Year National Economic Outlook report, the Finance Minister, Wale Edun, forecast 4.6% growth in 2026, With inflation averaging 16.5% and the naira currency stabilizing at around 1,400 naira per dollar. Now, he also said that Nigeria had reached a turning point after a turbulent transition marked by subsidy removals and exchange rate unification. Eto'o said inflation had eased to around 14% in November from 33% a year earlier. Now, the naira firmed below 1,500 naira per US dollars as well. Now, Eto'o said that growth averaged 3.78% in the first 9 months of 2025, while external reserves rose to $45.5 billion. Since taking office in 2023, President Bola Tinubu has, of course, rolled out Nigeria's most ambitious economic overhaul in decades by ending fuel and energy subsidies, twice devaluing the naira currency, and also changing the tax system to boost public finances. Now, the proposed Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline promises to reshape energy flows across West Africa into Europe. But behind the ambition lies a complex web of financing, also security and political risks. CGTN's Deji Bademosi tells us more.
With an estimated cost of $25 billion and a capacity of pumping 30 billion cubic meters of liquefied natural gas annually, the ambitious Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline has been positioned as an alternative gas route to Europe from the heart of Africa at a time of heightened global energy uncertainty. While a final investment decision on the project is still in the works, some investors like the United Arab Emirates, the OPEC Fund, the European Investment Bank and others have pledged financial commitments.
This initiative is great. Sending it to Morocco, Morocco now understands how to use its affinity and closeness to Europe. From Morocco to Europe, probably 20 minutes. So Morocco is now becoming a very big attraction, big commercial attraction for Europe and MENA.
And because it is also a project that cuts across 13 African countries, it is expected that African funding will also be put on the table. So the Afrexim of this world, the AFC of this world, the ADB of this world, those are all African financing, development financing institutions who will be required to pitch in into a financing like this.
But financing alone may not be enough. At the heart of the project is a question of gas supply and whether Nigeria can consistently deliver volumes at scale.
We don't have sufficient infrastructure to deliver gas to our own domestic economy. So it's frankly, even though it's a good idea, none of this really makes any sense until we get serious about making the necessary investments in infrastructure, making the necessary upstream investments in development of non-associated and associated gas to be able to fulfill our domestic obligations as well as our export aspirations.
As part of its decade of gas initiative to harness much of its 200 trillion cubic feet of proven natural gas reserves, Nigeria is ramping up investments in the country's gas sector. The government says it aims to unlock as much as $20 billion in new investments from 70 priority gas projects over the next few years.
Our gas production has also increased from about 6.5 million standard cubic feet to about over 7 billion standard cubic feet per day. So I think some of those are underpinned by very structural changes. We're also expecting to pull in additional investment, significant investment. We're expecting more investment decisions to come through.
Security is also a major challenge for the project. Large sections of the pipeline will run across regions affected by political instability and insurgency. But partners are undeterred by the challenge.
Even in countries where there are insecurity-related issues, these kind of discussions could still hold, in which the parties will deal with, even if it is warlords that are in those countries, will deal with those warlords to let them realize that, look, even you, as a warlord, your country needs this gas. Apart from that, this gas is a stabilizing factor across several countries all the way into Europe. where it is leading into.
Construction of the pipeline is expected to begin after the final investment decision, with a completion date of 2046. Nigeria is counting on the project to help it monetize its huge gas reserves and reduce current massive flaring. Should the project come to fruition, the country would effectively be on the path to energy security. DG Badimasi, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Well, let's turn to international news now. And Germany's GDP grew by 0.2% in 2025, and that ended 2 consecutive years of economic contraction. Well, CGTN's Peter Oliver has more on the significance of this return to growth and the factors that continue to hold the economy back.
0.2%, not a huge figure, but symbolically it could be massive for the mentality around German consumers, but also German industry and German manufacturing in particular. It comes off the back of 2 consecutive years of contraction. 0.2, not a big number, as I said, but it's still in the black and not in the red where things have been for a while now. When I talked about it being symbolically a big number, that's because, well, for a lot of the time, perception is reality when it comes to things like the economy, and the perception in Germany is that things are bad. 63% of those polled by the Eurozone Consumer Sentiment Survey said they thought things with the finances in Germany weren't looking so rosy. So modest growth, it's being driven by household spending and by government spending as well. Friedrich Merz's $500 billion, just over $500 billion worth of infrastructure money that he wanted to pump into Germany to sort out the crumbling infrastructure here seems to have had an effect there. Also, in household spend, I have heard it mentioned already. How much of that is down to things being, well, quite expensive these days? What we're looking at is Germany's export-led economy. The whole model of that economy is under fire right now. It's under fire from a number of directions, but really their exports are weak and investment into industry is incredibly weak at the moment. Global trade, also the uncertainty that exists there right now, not great if you're so reliant on exports. They've also fallen foul of Donald Trump's tariffs, as well as increasing competition in certain sectors, particularly the auto sector, where we've seen big names like VW and Audi come in real dire straits, with VW forced to lay off some staff and talking about closing down factories and everything like that as well. Ultimately, high energy costs have come into there as well. Let's look at some of the places where they've done well. If you're in the services sector, particularly if you're in hospitality and tourism, things have gone well. If you're selling those things that households are buying, you've also done well as well. Or if you're involved in infrastructure, you've done all right. However, the big things like cars, chemicals, and all those blue chip German companies, they've not done so good. So it's slim growth, but very, very slim.
Now, China has outlined new measures for 2026 to attract and optimize foreign investment. Officials confirmed the country remained the top developing world destination for foreign capital during the last 5-year plan. Now, facing global investment declines and geopolitical friction, China plans to counter external pressure by opening its economy even further. The 2026 agenda focuses on coordinating policy to spur consumption and innovation with foreign partners, also enhancing the Invest in China brand to promote reinvestment, improving services for key projects, balancing development and security, and refining investment data management to launch the next 5-year plan strongly. Well, that is all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up ahead on Global Business Africa, we'll take a look at the evolving mining policies in Africa as Ghana announces sweeping reforms, scrapping long-term mining investment agreements and double royalties. Of course, all of that coming up top of the hour. For now, it is back to you, Mike.
All right, Uche, thank you. Here's what's coming up in sports. CAF bans Cameroon Football Federation President Samuel Eto'o for 4 matches.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Cameroon Football Federation President Samuel Eto'o has been handed a 4-match ban by CAF for misconduct. The former Cameroon striker was also fined $20,000 after the continental governing body concluded he had violated its principles of sportsmanship. According to a statement released by CAF, the former Barcelona and Inter Milan striker was reportedly seen making an angry gesture over some of the decisions made by the officials as Cameroon lost to Morocco in the 2025 AFCON quarter-finals. Fecafoot expressed support for its president in a statement on Wednesday while suggesting Eto'o would appeal the sanction. Meanwhile, hosts Morocco are turning AFCON into a driver of tourism, investment and long-term development. The tournament is not just a sporting event but is also serving as a strategic showcase. The event's success aligns with Morocco's tourism roadmap for 2023 to 2026, which seeks to accelerate infrastructure and service upgrades. Officials say the AFCON is already delivering desired results. CGTN's Adnan Shawashi brings us the details.
From arrival to kick-off, supporters traveling from across Africa say Morocco's organization of AFCON has exceeded expectations by offering a smooth, safe and enjoyable experience in every host city.
We thank the Kingdom of Morocco for this warm welcome and the organization of AFCON.
The transport, the tourism, and everything is great here. The success of AFCON prepares for hosting the World Cup. The organization is very professional. It's a beautiful AFCON. This is the best AFCON ever.
The tournament has also given a lift to domestic tourism, as supporters from all corners of the kingdom travel between the 6 host cities to watch the matches.
As a Moroccan fan, I'm proud of the achievements of my country. Meeting AFCON-related tourists from all over the continent is an amazing and beautiful experience.
Travel agencies and tourism operators are seeing increased business as AFCON fuels a surge in visitors. From fast food counters to neighborhood restaurants, small businesses are feeling the impact of the AFCON tourist influx.
There is a huge push for tourism. We work before, during and after the matches. AFCON is a great opportunity for all business activities in Morocco.
Morocco welcomed nearly 19.8 million tourists in 2025, up 14% from the previous year. Officials say AFCON has helped boost visibility and confidence, marking a new chapter for the country's tourism sector. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN.
Now, the final draw for the CAF Women's Africa Cup of Nations to be held in Morocco later this year took place on Thursday. The hosts will be joined in Group A by Algeria, Senegal and Kenya. Group B will feature South Africa, Cote d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso and Tanzania. Defending champions Nigeria were drawn in a challenging Group C along with Zambia, Egypt and debutants Malawi. Group D will feature Ghana, Cameroon, Mali and the other debutant, that's Cape Verde. Now the top 2 sides in each group will advance to the quarterfinals and the 4 teams that reach the semi-finals will qualify for the 2027 FIFA Women's World Cup in Brazil. However, it will not be the end of the road for the quarterfinal losers as they will play in a set of matches to determine which 2 African teams will enter the Inter-Confederation playoffs for a place at the World Cup. To Spanish football news now. Real Madrid coach Alvaro Arbeloa said on Friday he did not want to dwell on the past, but his focus was only on the Spanish giants' upcoming matches. Arbeloa took the blame for Real Madrid's stunning 3-2 defeat to second division Albacete in the Copa del Rey round of 16 on Wednesday. Arbeloa inherits a side 4 points adrift of their arch rivals Barcelona in La Liga and now are out of the Copa del Rey. Arbeloa, who has French star Kylian Mbappe back on the squad, asked fans to support their team despite their recent bad form.
It's the Real Madrid mentality. The past doesn't exist. And whether you win European Cups or you get knocked out by Albacete, you have to think about the next match, about beating Levante and looking forward. That is Real Madrid.
And that does it for this edition of Africa Live. Do remember, if you'd like to get in touch with the program, you can always send your feedback to those contacts on your screen now, and follow us as well on all of our digital media platforms. I'm Mahe Mutwa. Thanks for watching Africa Live.